Welcome, everyone, to the second European AI Alliance Assembly. My name is Anya Seetharam, and I'm really pleased to be the moderator of this important event. As well as being a former BBC news anchor, my background is health and science journalism. So over 20 years ago, I was reporting on stories from around the globe for the BBC's flagship science programme called Tomorrow's World. And many of those stories were on artificial intelligence prototypes, from robots that could imitate animals to voice and facial recognition systems. And I even met my own avatar at that point. I would never have dreamed back then that one day I would be sitting here facilitating an event with all you key stakeholders, with Europe's leading decision makers on AI and leading experts, discussing the future of AI in Europe. And many of the other novel futuristic technologies I reported on didn't come to fruition. But AI, although it seemed really fantastical at the time, perhaps because of all those science fiction movies, is now fast growing and actually transforming our lives. Now, as you know, today's event comes after the publication of the Commission's white paper and also the public consultation. And today we're going to be exploring two key pillars of that white paper. We're going to be looking at excellence and trust. This morning we have a plenary discussion on how to make an ecosystem of excellence. And that's going to be followed by 3 workshops, which everybody can take part in on the theme of excellence. And this afternoon, we're going to be looking at how to build an ecosystem of trust. And you can send in your questions via Slido, #AI Alliance. And just to make sure it's working properly, I've got a question for you now. So just tell us where you are sitting, which country you're in, so we can get a sense of who's in our big virtual room. Yes, well, I can see Brussels, and I can see Germany, Munich, Croatia, Austria. Yeah, it's really well represented, actually. Thank you, everyone. It's fantastic to have all these people watching from their offices and their sitting rooms. It's rather strange, isn't it? But here we are all together, and after all, we're all digital, so quite appropriate, actually. Anyway, that's enough preamble from me for the moment. Let's officially start today's session with a few words of welcome from Thierry Breton, European Commissioner for Internal Market.
Dear members of the Artificial Intelligence Alliance, I am very grateful to be with you today for the second assembly of the European Artificial Intelligence Alliance. The number and variety of participants shows that there is a great interest in this topic. And indeed, today I see the whole breadth of stakeholders in the virtual room: businesses and trade unions, public authorities, academic and civil society. Clearly, you share our analysis that the data economy and artificial intelligence have a huge potential. Our society is generating a huge wave of industrial and public data, which will transform the way we produce, consume, and live. We want European businesses and our many SMEs to access this data and create value for Europeans, including by developing AI applications. Europe has everything it takes to preserve its digital sovereignty, industrial leadership, and economic competitiveness to the benefit of European consumers. We have seen more than one example of this potential over the last few months. AI has helped in the diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of COVID-19. AI-based image analytics have been deployed quickly. AI models are used to speed up the work on cures and vaccines. Robots and advanced sensors help disinfect hospital premises, or support patients at home. Nobody saw the pandemic coming, but Europe's excellent AI scientists, engineers, and researchers have been able to react and to redirect their efforts to the new need. To be able to do the same next time when such a challenge arises, it is crucial that we stay at the forefront of AI technology. In the white paper, which we published in February, we call this an ecosystem of excellence because it requires a variety of actors and it requires the right environment too. Europe still has a strong position in AI excellence, in research, but we need to increase our efforts to remain at the cutting edge of industrial developments in AI. And we have to leverage our strengths. Europe has a wealth of industrial data that gives us an important comparative advantage. If we can make sure that European companies have access to European data, it will give them a much needed boost in stimulating developments in AI that are made in Europe and respectful of our values, such as privacy, safety, and other fundamental rights. It will also allow us to become more autonomous in AI and in related technologies. This is not about isolating ourselves, but about having European alternatives and pursuing our own values and not relying on choices made somewhere else. Take the example of the microelectronic components, which underpin most of the electronic products and devices, of course, we have today. By increasing computational power, they have helped to unfold developments in AI. And in the future, we will have to support even more computational requirements. In Europe, we can make sure they are energy efficient and trustworthy. If we have excellence and autonomy, we'll be able to take full advantage of the potential of the new technologies, the data economy. And this potential is enormous. The value of the data economy in the EU in 2018 was over 300 billion and is expected to grow almost 3 times to 830 billion by 2025. Therefore, in the white paper, we have set out a number of actions to promote European excellence in AI by streamlining research, looking into future generations of AI, less data hungry and more explainable, and increasing investment into AI development and deployment by supporting testing and experimentation through the Digital Europe program. I'm glad to see that during the public consultation launched with the white paper, a vast majority of respondents from across the spectrum support our efforts in this respect. The white paper also reaffirmed the objective of mobilizing over 20 billion of total investment in the EU per year in AI over the next decade, as agreed in the coordinated plan between the Commission and Member States adopted in 2018. We now have an additional opportunity to bring this ambition into reality, thanks to the Recovery and Resilience Facility. As President von der Leyen emphasized in her State of the Union address, 20% of the funds will be invested in digital. Early next year, we will update the coordinated plan so as to work with the Member States in closer synergies and see what more can be done to foster excellence. But excellence only gets you so far. If you want to use that excellence, you need to get people to accept your new product and services. You need them to trust you. That's why, in parallel with the ecosystem of excellence, we also need an ecosystem of trust. Citizens need to trust companies to respect their rights. Businesses need to trust vendors to sell reliable products. So, if there are stories of self-driving cars, accident, or breaches of our fundamental rights, for example, in the case of profiling without consent, they will undermine trust. For this reason, we need to take measures to prevent these harmful experiences. We set them out in the white paper, and we received an enormous number of comments, many, by the way, from outside of the EU. Most respondents felt that existing legislation has some gaps, or that new legislation is needed. And on specific use cases, such as biometric remote identification, the majority supports some kind of restriction, whether a ban, a moratorium, or the imposition of restrictions on the use. However, beyond excellence and trust, we also need to ensure that the benefit of AI will reach the EU as a whole, both geographically to all member states and sector by sector to all industries. Indeed, there are plenty of companies in Europe that could profitably use AI, but lack the capacity to take the first step. That is why we are devoting so much attention to the digital innovation hubs, for example, in technology transfer centers, where companies can get practical support. They have proven successful so far, and we intend to scale them up under the new Digital Europe program as much as the new budget allocation will permit. In fact, every company in Europe should have access to this kind of service in their vicinity. Indeed, President von der Leyen said in her State of the Union speech, Europe must now lead the way on digital. She didn't say some parts of Europe must now lead. She also said that she wants a set of rules that are human-centric and sufficiently clear if something goes wrong. Being at the forefront of technology, respecting our European values, and taking everybody on board, that's the European way. I believe in it. Thank you all.
And thank you for Commissioner Thierry Breton reminding us of that human-centric approach that the white paper emphasizes to build a thriving AI industry in Europe. Now, to represent the EU Council presidency, I would like to welcome Ulrich Nussbaum, State Secretary to the Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy, Germany.
Dear Commissioner Breton, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Minister Altmaier and as a representative of the Council presidency, it's really a great pleasure to welcome you all to the second AI Alliance meeting. The COVID-19 pandemic continues to pose a crucial challenge for the EU Council presidency, which Germany has now held for just over 3 months. Not only it is affecting the way we are holding our meetings and events with our European partners, it is also dominating the issues we are prioritizing during our presidency. The fight against the virus, the curbing of the pandemic, and the recovery of the European economy are the main issues on our agenda. It is now important for us to put Europe on a path of growth, which safeguards our competitiveness and our jobs for the long term. Investments in climate change mitigation, innovation, and digitization are the key for a successful future. So this is what we are working on. We will only see a sustained economic recovery if we lead European business to new strengths. Together for Europe's recovery, this task is the motto for our Council presidency. Our main focus is therefore on coping with the crisis and its consequences, speeding up the economic recovery by strengthening the internal market in our companies, and pressing ahead with the digital and green transition. And a major role is played here by artificial intelligence, a key technology for the future. We need it to help safeguard our ability to innovate and our future competitiveness. in view of the vast capabilities of AI, it is now more important than ever that for the EU to harness its full potential for the benefit of society, the people, and the economy. The European Commission's white paper on artificial intelligence has provided us with plenty of options for European concept of excellence and trust. The Commission has also held a public consultation in which all interested parties have been able to take part. Research establishments, business associations and companies, trade unions, NGOs, individual citizens and member states. Many of you have also taken part and have thus provided valuable input for the future decisions to be taken in this area. This helps not only the European Commission to gain an overview of the various viewpoints, it also helps the member states of the European Union. On behalf of the Council Presidency, I therefore thank the European Commission for presenting the white paper and holding the consultation, and you for providing valuable input. We should all aim to develop a European approach to AI in which innovation and trust in a border-free single market for AI are two sides of the same coin. AI made in Europe. And I'm glad that panel discussions with top-class experts will be taking place on both sides of the coin. The first panel will consider the various measures needed to build an ecosystem of excellence. This afternoon, you will look at the ecosystem of trust and discuss various regulatory options to ensure trusted AI. At the end of the day, it is important for us to strike the right balance. We need to foster technological innovations whilst addressing the risks. And we need to think both sides together if we are to achieve global success with our standards, our research, and our applications. In the last few weeks, the COVID-19 crisis has shown us impressively how artificial intelligence can help us to tackle new challenges, and how important it is to have trusted AI. By creating a common, genuinely European approach, we can take the lead in this area, inspire others, and complete it at a global level. In this way, we can shape the development of AI to our benefit and ensure that it protects our citizens, fosters innovation and societal progress, and conforms to our rules and values. I'm confident that thanks to our input, we will succeed in this, and I wish you all a successful event. My hope is that the next meeting of the AI Alliance will see us meeting in person, busily networking in one place. AI can also help to make this happen with excellence and trust. Thank you very much.
Well, as Mr. Nussbaum flagged, they'll be shortly moving on to our panel discussion on excellence. But before that, I've got another question for you on Slido. And thanks for telling us before where you all are. So my Slido question is, in a maximum of 2 words, what would be your idea to make Europe the place to be for AI scientists and developers? And we're going to have another word cloud and just see which is the most popular idea. So what would be your idea to make Europe the place to be for scientists and developers? Well, we've already got some there. We've got infrastructure, regulation, and of course, innovation friendly. And innovation is a word that I'm sure will be coming up a lot in our discussions today. Balanced. That's interesting. What else have we got here? I think I'll have to put my glasses on to see this. It's very small. I'm sure we've got some more coming in. Automotive industry. Keep those coming in. Thank you. Right, I'm going to go on now to our panel discussion and introduce our speakers. So we're going to be talking about an ecosystem of excellence, make it happen. And we have 7 speakers today who are going to discuss the different actions that are needed to foster that excellence. So let me just introduce you to all the speakers we have. We have Lola Baz, who's Research Project Director at SAP Technology and Innovation and Vice President of the Big Data Value Association. We have Marina Bill. She's the Global Head of Marketing and Sales, Robotics and Discrete Automation at ABB, a global technology company. And in the chat, when we have the word cloud, she said she was in Zurich. We have Giuseppe Casale, Deputy Director of the International Training Center of the ILO and Director of the Turin School of Development. We have Rita Cucciara, Professor and Head of Research Center, University da Modena a Reggio Emilia. We have Christelle Fiorina, Senior Project Leader, AI, French Ministry of Economy and Finance. We have Frederick Heinz, Associate Professor of Computer Science at Linköping University in Sweden. And we also have Yassir Kokar, CEO and founder of Connectera. That's based in the Netherlands, and its mission is to build an artificial intelligence IDA that grows food sustainably. And in the biography I read, it says it has developed better than human competences for dairy farming. So I'm sure that will raise a few eyebrows, maybe not. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us all. And I'm going to start with one round of questions, and then I hope we can do some more. And I will be taking questions from the audience. So please keep them coming in on Slido. So my first question actually is just to boil down to basics. I'm going to ask Rita Cucciara, why do we need an ecosystem of excellence?
Okay, thank you very much. I hope that, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay. Good morning to everyone. Thanks for the invitation. I'm very proud to discuss with you about the excellence of AI and the motivation we need that. I think that we have two motivations. The first one is that we already are an excellence in AI from the scientific point of view, and we need to keep and to maintain this level of excellence around the world. Look, this is not just only a motto or just only some words, but is based on fact. The first fact, if you look at the scientific point of view, the Congress, the conferences, the journal on AI, Italy, Germany, France, Spain, Poland, every part of Europe is always present in the most qualified conference in the world. And especially in some applicative fields, like for instance, computer vision, natural language processing, embedded AI in the robotics and so on. I think that our excellence is very considered, so much that all of our students are very appreciated, and unfortunately, they very often go away. So the second reason is that we need to be an excellence from the societal and political point of view. We must think to the future of the generation of the students that now are going abroad out of Europe and has not to do that. In this moment, we need to keep the idea that Europe can be with his principle of democracy on ethics and so on, a third big power against US and China. And we really should be autonomy, not only for the idea that is important, but also for our industry. I'm very afraid of the fact that our industry in the future could just only have AI that come from outside Europe. So we need to be excellence.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So good reasons there why we need to have excellence, and not least because of the competition from other countries. But you say we are already excellent here in Europe. So what do you think is needed to mobilize research teams and researchers across Europe to make this happen?
Are you asking me?
Yes, I'm asking you, Rita.
Okay, good. So this is a difficult question because I think that Europe in the last 2 years is doing a lot. It's doing a lot because we created some network very important, like Alice, like Claire, like Human AI, and we did project together. So we are trying to go in the common goal, but we need to do more. What I say, if I look 15 years ago, no, probably 13 years ago, we started in Europe in FP7 some big project like Pascal and Pascal 2, where we put the basis of the change in computer vision before the revolution of deep learning. So, and this information was coming from Europe because creating this network of big excellence were able to work together. So first of all, we need to have the contact to the different groups that now there are in Europe. I would like to spend one word about what we are doing in Italy, because I'm director of the Italian National Lab that put together 55 labs in all Italy that belongs to different communities. So we need to speak together. The second is that we need to have a project together from the scientific point of view and not always for the applicative point of view. I give one example in 1 second. Let's consider generative neural networks. So generative AI that can create and predict something is a research that is started from the US. Now in Europe, there are a lot of researchers that are doing that. And this kind of research that is put together imagination, predictability, and so on, can be used for resiliency by disaster, can be used for the design of new object, can be used in medicine. So we need to have a foundation of AI that then we can apply directly in many different tasks, in many different things. And I believe that we can do this together. Last things, if I can, to add just only very important information, is about universities and about the possibility to work together. Some years ago, many years ago again, we did the Bologna meeting in order to unify the courses at bachelor and master level. So now we have a good change. We had to do the same at PhD level. From the salary, because in some part of Europe, the salary of PhD are very high, in the other side of Europe are not, from the length of PhD and for the possibility of exchange. I think that we can do, and if we will have this unity at the European level, I think that we can do really a lot in the next decade.
Thank you very much, Rita. And let's go to another academic, Professor Frederick Heinz. We had lots of points there. One about universities working together. We need to have a foundation of AI. Is there a skills gap, and how do we fill it?
Oh, there's most definitely is a serious and significant skill gap. And personally, I believe this is probably the biggest challenge because, of course, without the skills and talent, there would be no innovation. And even if there is innovation, there will not be people to fill the positions at the companies to take these innovations and make them commercial successes. And we also need to, I mean, now that AI is actually influencing more or less everyone at some level, it means that everyone needs to understand the basics of AI. So I think this is a huge challenge.
Right. Okay. So how do we fill that gap, though? You say there's a huge challenge. What are your ideas for changing that?
So, of course, there are different things. I mean, we can start with just taking normal academic education. I think here we are quite good. I mean, I think that we produce high quality AI researchers and AI masters and bachelors. Of course, the volume is too low. So there we have a volume issue. We need to educate more. But then the next step, which is somewhat more challenging, is that we need people that are both experts in an area such as law or medicine or economics and so on, that also understands AI. So you need people with this kind of dual degrees. Here, I think we need to do more, but we're starting to do a few things. Then the third area is how do we really realize this idea of lifelong learning, because actually most of the things we learn will be done outside of education. We will need to learn much more after we leave our education during our actual career. And here we have to work much more on both the kind of industrial side, so make sure that people have the time to learn on the job. I think we need as individuals to take more responsibility for learning more in our kind of spare time. And from the university side, we are actually, so taking Sweden as an example, we have an initiative called AI Competence from the Swedish government, where we have most of the universities are working together to develop professional development courses and activities. And we also share our experience, because this is an area where we as universities haven't done that much in the past, and where we need to do much more. And we also need to do this, of course, in collaboration with industry and the public sector, because there are the people who need to take advantage of these courses. So there we need to find new ways of educating people on the job. The fourth is, of course, educating the public, the general public. So here we have, for example, the Finnish initiative, Elements of AI, which is about teaching everyone the basics of AI, which is now being spread to more, I think, all European countries, which I think is a great initiative. And then from our side as the university, we are now building kind of follow-up courses, so that you've learned the basics. Now you want to take the next step. And then we are offering and developing and offering courses to achieve that.
So lots being offered there in Sweden, and also you mentioned the Finnish example. But do you think Europe is lagging behind countries like America or China in terms of education?
So I mean, if you take China as an example, of course, they have, like 1 million engineers every year. So of course, there is this volume difference is significant. I think quality-wise, we are doing very well. As Rita mentioned, I'm not worried about quality. It's more a question of volume, and there we have a challenge. Compared to the US system, I think a challenge is we don't really, always have this kind of major-minor system, which I think is very useful, because then you can do a major in, say, you use law or medicine or journalism, and then you do a minor in computer science and learn about the kind of digital world and AI, and then you can use these two together. And actually, I was over at Stanford and Berkeley a few years back, looking at their kind of computer science education, and at Stanford, basically everyone took their introductory computer science course, not because it was mandatory, but because they realized that this is what I need. It doesn't matter what I'm going to do in the future. I need to learn the basics of computer science. And today, of course, that would also include AI. And I think that's the kind of mentality we need here as well, where basically everyone learns the basics. And personally, I would very much like to see that done already in the primary education. And actually, I know that several countries are now kind of introducing programming and computational thinking, which is probably the more important skill, into the primary education. And that's we need more of that.
Thank you. So two really interesting views there on education and on university education, on lifelong learning, and on primary education. And as you say, we need volume and interest from the public and people to realize the importance of AI and computer science and not be frightened of it. Let me now go to Lola Baz. We're going to talk about private-public partnerships. We heard there a little bit about industry. How do you think, you yourself at the heart of developing public-private partnerships, and how do you think PPP can be fostered in this sector?
Thank you. So as you said, artificial intelligence and also data and robotics are really the core drivers of innovation, productivity, and economic growth. And I will somehow paraphrase what Thierry Breton said earlier. Europe has a vision, leading the world in human-centric and trustworthy AI, data and robotics, and compatible with European values and rights. And this is what this new partnership is about, is really establishing an open, collaborative, inclusive hub for those technologies with partners from industry, so from large industry, SMEs and startups, also the research and academic world we mentioned earlier, also all kind of actors like regulators, investors, national and regional and local governments, communities or users, a user association, representative from the civil society. And of course, we will collaborate with the European Commission. The vision of this partnership, and here I will quote the official version, is to boost European competitiveness, societal well-being and environmental aspects, to lead the world in researching, developing and deploying the value-driven, trustworthy AI, data and robotics, all based on European fundamental rights, principles and values. So this is what this partnership is about. We intend to boost new markets and application, attract public and private investment, create this technical, economical, and societal value for business, for citizens, for environment again. So this is where European sovereignty is expected. We mentioned it earlier in the development and deployment of this trustworthy AI, safe, also robust, etc. And again, it always has to be compatible with EU values and regulation. So we intend to build bridges between those different stakeholders and enable really this vision to flourish.
So how are you going to do that? I mean, where are you in this project?
So we build on the current Horizon 2020 partnership, so namely Big Data Value Association and EU robotics, as PPP, as public-private partnerships already achieve high impact, cohesion and engagement with the wider data and robotics ecosystem.
Right, okay.
We continue on this. We collaborate already for more than 2 years, building up this new partnership, expand to the broader AI community. So was mentioned earlier, Your AI, Alice, and Claire. So that's concrete. This is really we are ready for next year.
Okay, and what do you think will be your first concrete achievement?
There are plenty. I mean, and that's this we already described in this strategic research and innovation and deployment agenda, the 3DA. So we will develop those and increase the partnership, paying attention as well to this balance, not only geographically, but also between academia, research, industry, the representativeness of the different communities, as mentioned earlier. So this is really a joint strategy, and where we leverage the European strength and the unique selling points that we have to develop a strong focus on new emerging business. So there are all kinds of activities. So some are technology driven, so we really look at the technical aspect. Others are more like domain-oriented. Health is one of them, transport and mobility, etc. So all kind of industry and domain that we can think of.
Thank you very much for that. Let's move on then to hear about the private sector, and let's hear about startups. We're joined by Yassir Kokar. His firm is called Connectera. Do you think enough is being done to foster startups and SMEs in this area?
I think so. I mean, that's probably a contrarian answer to what you hear startup guys say. I'd always say, hey, no, give me more money. No, I think there's quite a bit that's being done. I think the challenge with startups in the ecosystem, we can think differently about it. I think talent is one big issue. I think Frederick mentioned that earlier. And we really need to figure out a way to get better talent into Europe, and not just within Europe, but within the specific countries in Europe where we need it the most, where there is a massive shortage. I think that's an area that we could do better in. I think the second area that we could do better in is enabling opportunity. I think we talk in Europe about regulation, we talk about funding, but we need to talk about opportunity enablement. Startups are fragile. startups move fast, but they also die fast. And they will die when there is a lack of opportunity or enablement. So whether this is trade missions, trade deals that can enable startups to scale. The other thing with startups is that they'll die when they run out of money. And the tricky part is that you need to be able to get to scale, get to customers before you run out of money. And if we can create policy or enablement opportunities around that space for the good startups, you really want the good ones to be able to cross that chasm. That I think could be way more beneficial than adding more pots into some of the other areas that we're looking at. And that's where I would typically look at trade agreements. I would look at opportunity creation within and outside of Europe.
No, you shouldn't be saying that. You should be saying Europe. Europe is excellence, and the European ecosystem and the European values. But where would you like to see that money coming from? You're saying you're worried about startups running out. How about public-private partnerships? Could that help?
Yeah, I think public-private partnerships are really, really valuable. Because if you look at the venture capital space where a lot of startups will go to acquire funding, having government clients is a huge benefit. It's a 10x multiplier. So obviously, public-private partnerships is one part of that. But I would also look at just simple enablement of getting startups to scale. I think when you look at China or US or Europe, the problem is scale. If you're a startup in the US, you can scale real quick within the US market. But if you scale in Europe, you have to scale across different countries, different languages, different geographies. You've got a scale problem here. And that's something which I think also needs to be looked at, which is enablement of the scale for AI companies. End of the day, sorry, just one final point. End of the day, AI is about scale, both in terms of data volume and data quality. And you'll need to enable that.
Okay, and that's a sort of perfect segue into our next speaker, Christelle Fiorina. You could talk about the national level from in France, but what about scaling from startups across the whole of Europe? How can European cooperation bring those AI benefits?
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm very glad to speak in this meeting today. Yes, effectively, the national strategy in France was announced in March 2018 by the President Emmanuel Macron, and it goes with an unprecedented public investment of 1.5 billion euros for AI in research, in innovation, startups, business, and also for talents from 2018 to 2022. And yes, what was announced by our president is that he wants France to be one of the leading AI countries in the world. But in our conception of AI, we must build this leading project in the framework of European Union, because we think that the competition, the global competition between China, especially, and USA, the good level to make AI is the European level, not only France or Germany or Finland, Netherlands. The best way is to create this leading project in Europe with the other member states and with the European Commission. And we want now to have concrete projects with companies, with research institutes to have excellence. What we want to create attractiveness on the European territories, attractiveness for business, startups, talents, because we have a lot of complementarities between the different countries in Europe. But for the moment, the market is still fragmented, and we want to work on that with the coordinated plan.
Right. Okay. But what about a startup which might be in the Netherlands trying to grow in Europe? What could it do in France? What would enable it to grow in France as well?
Well, for a startup, the startup could have a good research ecosystem in France. It could find the good talents to make business in France and also to develop in France, because we have a lot of national dispositions to help the startups and the talents to invest in France and to grow in France. And the startups will have a market for companies that demand AI technologies in France, because we are leading a lot of projects for that. We are currently, and especially with the recovery plan, we are creating a good ecosystem in the and demand in industry, in environment, in mobility, for example, and for health. A good demand in business companies to buy that kind of technologies and to develop AI projects in France.
Okay, before I go on to our next speaker, I just want to go back to Yathir Koka. I just wanted to get your reaction to what was just being said about the enablement in France for small startups.
It remains difficult. It remains challenging for us to even cross borders within from bringing from Netherlands to the France. I think in theory it works. There isn't a whole lot of bureaucracy that I need to go and set up an operation in France. But we need more support. It is a different country. It's got different rules. It's got different perspectives, different industries. We get a lot more pull from outside of Europe, where we get trade missions saying, come to the US, come to Wisconsin, come to the UK. We need more support within Europe that can help us scale into these countries, that can come from the government. They say, listen, we've got it all set up for you. Just bring your tech and we'll help you connect. We'll get you this local support and help you navigate these local nuances. That's just from my very practical experience being a leader of a small startup. So. Okay,
thank you. And just before I go to our next speaker, I just want to go back again to one of our previous speakers, and I just like to bring Laura Bars in there. Do you have a view on that from where you're sitting? That would enable startups and help them thrive in the system that you're working in?
Yeah, this is exactly the experience we have in the actual partnerships, and we hope to continue in the future, where really it's a chance for the startups to network with all kind of different stakeholders, and not just to get access to a market, but really to or technologies, but really to exchange on the different aspect and bring the challenges on the table and learn from the others and reach eventually VCs if it's the question. So that's the idea, really to build this community, this networking ecosystem, as we mentioned earlier. So that's important. It doesn't make it all, but that's really, as I mentioned earlier, open and collaborative hub. That's what we intend to do, and we have been successful in the previous, the actual partnership.
Thank you. Before I go on to our next theme, which is going to be about jobs, I just wanted to know if Frederick Heinz or Rita Cucciara had a view on that. I don't know, Rita, I just sort of see that you're kind of reacting to what's being said. Do you have a view on any of this from where you're sitting?
You think about startups, I think. Yeah, okay, I live in Modena, that is in Emilia-Romagna, is a part in the industrial part of Italy. And contacting all the part of Italy and also looking what they are doing fantastically in the PPP works, because I like a lot what they are doing. I can say two things. I believe that in Italy and in Europe, we have to do more strength for startup helping other companies, other industries, and societal challenges. So we are growing up startups in IT and in AI that can be the support for manufacturing industry, for automotive industry from one side, and from medical and health system in the other. I believe that this is an important way, because we have to reconstruct the whole pipeline of the value. So from the data, the requirement, to the processing, to the use of AI. And we need to support this middle part. In Italy and in our region, we try to do that, creating new startups that helping other industry. I think that many other in other countries are doing that. And I think that we have to recreate the infrastructure of high-level IT for all the economy and all the society.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much, Rita. Now, I want to look at AI and jobs. We're still got this whole umbrella of excellence that we're talking about. And I'd like to bring in Giuseppe Casale from the ILO training unit. So how can AI research and innovation help Europe become a leader, but with this human-centric approach?
Thank you, Anya. Good morning to everyone. Yes, it's really a 1 million question. Since the problem with the current situation is that there is a constant distraction of jobs, and we have to reinvent practically the old labor paradigm in order to make sure that the jobs created today will stay also in the future. It's not only a problem at the national level, but it's a big problem worldwide. Recently, the ILO has published, and you can see it on the webpage of the ILO, one of the analyses made by our labor market economists, who are telling us that by 2030, there is a need to create at least 300 million new jobs worldwide, of course. But this means also that AI can do a lot in assisting current politicians, current trade unionists, current entrepreneurs in creating what Yassir was saying before, the enabling environment in order to make sure that new jobs can actually be created and sustained. Because this is the problem. It's easy to create jobs, but if these jobs are destroyed in less than a decade, it's not going to be good for the rest of the generation. The human-centered approach has been the very first cry at the international level by the ILO last year, with the adoption of the ILO declaration, which was actually called the ILO Centering Declaration for the Future of Work. And it's there where the human-centered approach has been recognized worldwide. What does it mean? It means that all of us should understand finally that we need to invest more in some segments, in some sectors of the economy and also of the society. And what are these three major, we call it, segments? One is increased investments in people's capabilities. Second is increased investment in the institutions of work, including the legal framework. And third, increased investment in decent and sustainable work. By the way, it's important to notice here the language, the terminology. For the very first time, we are no longer talking about costs, but we are talking about investments. And this is something that at international level, last year, the delegates of 193 countries realized that there is a need to really invest as much as possible now. And this is also what the European Union is doing. This is also what the European Commission is leading. In listening a bit of what Commissioner Breton was saying in his video message, there is a lot of synergy between what the ILO is preaching and what the European Commission would like to do about it. I personally have a dream. My dream, sitting here in the International Training Center of the ILO, which is the training arm of this organization, and also particularly for entrepreneurs, employers, but also trade union representatives and the civil society at large. I have a dream to see one day a universal entitlement recognized at the international level to lifelong learning, from childhood to adult learning. If we want to make sure that in particular Europe remains what has always been and will continue to be as an example for the rest of the world, this in my view means also the full recognition from education to continuous training. If we accompany the individual, and this is why people's capabilities is important, throughout the different transitions of the futures of the economy, including also the effects of AI will be inevitably, it's already doing, but inevitably will further create it, then we make sure that everyone is on board, and then we become more inclusive. If we leave some of the population outside, and this is the big risk that we need to avoid, then it will be very difficult to have what we call it a sustainability of the rights, the sustainability of the economy, and the sustainability for the future generation. This is my message today to all of you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Casale. So I'd like to bring in our final speaker before we do another round of questions, and that's Marina Bill, who's the Global Head of Marketing and Sales at AABB's Robotics and Discrete Automation Center. Before I talk to you about enabling the robotics industry, I just wondered if you had any comments on what's been said before in terms of fostering excellence in Europe, and the idea that perhaps Europe is lagging behind.
Yeah, firstly, I think Europe has a pretty good situation right now. Still, if we look upon the robotics part, the density of robotics in the top 20 countries, half of them are actually European countries. And also there was a readiness index of being done 2 years ago, and also there, half of the companies are European companies. So we have a pretty good, stable base, I think, to stand on, but we need to continue to develop this. And I particularly like the ideas with startup and also how we work together, also larger companies, startups, and that we have this partnership approach all over, which I think is really important to really develop things and put them into use.
So what would you like to see the European Commission do to improve acceptance of AI-powered robots and in the industry?
Yeah, thank you for having me first here. As I said, at AABB Robotics, we have delivered about 400,000 industrial robots in 72. So we're one of the ones who started the robotic industry, and we have a factory in Europe, one of the largest robotic factories in the world, which is in Västerås in Sweden. So I think what is important when we talk about acceptance and usage of AI and robotics is to separate fiction and fact. And sometimes in this fiction world, the robots will become human and they will evilly take over the world and so on. But if we took upon the facts, robots are here to support and help people in an unstructured environment. And if you're an engineer, as I am, that technology is actually more fascinating and exciting than many science fiction parts. And we live in really exciting times, where the industry is going through one of the largest shifts since decades with the digitalization. And then came COVID, and that changed even more the things we do, and it impacts the business continuity in our everyday life. But if we look upon the trends that is pushing AI and robotics as now, those trends hasn't changed due to the COVID. But they have accelerated them, and they really accelerated them to a large degree. So if we look upon the mega trends we normally talk about, the individualized consumer, that we want personalized products when we buy them, which is putting a lot of challenges to manufacturing, which needs flexibility in the manufacturing that comes out of automation. The labor shortage, we know that, about 40% of everybody will be over 65 in Europe in 2030. The same figure for China is 30% in 2030. That's also one of the reasons that we see this big push on AI in China. And we already know the part of it's hard to find skilled workers for many things like welding today. People don't want to have unergonomical works, dirty, dull, and unsecure works. And then we have the whole unsecurity in the world. If it's a natural disaster or pandemic, it has really shown us, and the trend that is pushing this is we need to keep up mission critical production also in special times. And it was very interesting now in the pandemic to see how our customers using our offers in this. Companies who normally does furniture all of a sudden could start with a flexible production to produce masks. Companies who done ships could start doing ventilators. So with using the technology, it could immediately be used in the market. And then the digitalization. When a lot of production started to start up again in Europe, we could use digitalization, for instance, to do remote commissioning, which meant that we didn't have to be on site. So all of these trends we look upon very often for large companies, but I think they're even more relevant in Europe for the small and middle-sized companies to really push what we can do with the acceptance and the usage of AI. So what we need to do is really work in an ecosystem to get one step further here. And we need this partnership approach, which I see with universities, with startups, with states. This week, we're actually releasing a project that we're doing with the state of Singapore and universities to put up a COVID center to, with automation, with robotics, with IA, do quicker and faster COVID testing. So good thing of how we can co-innovate and co-cooperate. So I think AI is a huge chance for Europe, but we need to look even more into public partnerships, testing facilities, common testing facilities, education initiatives that includes the whole industry. And with that, I think we in Europe have a big chance to really embrace this technology and put it us all one step ahead here.
So that's quite an inspiring talk there, and also the fact that you're seizing the opportunity to move into new areas and be quite flexible, and that's a sort of prescription for everybody in these times of COVID. I just wanted to bring in a couple of questions that are coming in from our audience, and Marina, as I'm talking to you now, I'm going to ask you one that's just come in, and you might disagree with it actually. It says, why are there so few technology companies in Europe, at least the very visible ones, compared to the tech giants in the US and China?
Well, I would maybe disagree that there are so few. Maybe some of them could be shown much more. I would say there's a lot. And as I said, this automation readiness index that I talked about, that's looking upon how many companies, how the policies are done in Europe, and so on. That's showing that Europe having a really big part. But it's as always, we shouldn't, we have to continue to develop. So I think it's a good, challenging question. How can it become even more? But I think we are not in such a bad state as we are, but we need to continue to co-innovate and co-collaborate to continue to develop.
Does anyone else have a view on that? Put your hands up if you want to speak. Yeah, go on then. Yasir.
Yeah. It's an interesting question, and I think Marina is right. I agree with her to some point, but at the same time, I think what we need to understand is in certain sectors, Europe does not compete at all with the US. If you take new tech, if you take social media, if you take what's with all those big tech companies, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Amazon, Europe doesn't have any one of those. Yes, Europe has beautiful companies around manufacturing and automation, but that's a completely different sector which is visible. My point of view on this is a little philosophical. I think it has to come with Europe's appetite for risk, historical appetite for risk and risk-taking. Silicon Valley drove these companies, and Silicon Valley's culture has been that of risk. And being able to take it and be able to fund it, both from a culture standpoint, from a funding standpoint, and letting these companies do the things that they can do. Now, I'm not advocating they have their own problems with their size and what's happening with Facebook these days, with some of the ethical problems that they're now facing. I think we can learn from it. But there is room for us to have a bigger appetite for risk and be okay to fail. Silicon Valley didn't become Silicon Valley just like that. It was a very conscious decision to say it's okay to fail. and it's okay to take bigger risks. And that's an attitude that I think we need to bring in, especially in things like public-private partnerships. Yes, we have them really, really well, but when you actually engage in a conversation with a large company or even with a public sector company, the risk levels are way higher. We need a six-year pilot. We're going to test every little one of them. You go to the US and they're like, hey, let's do this. Let's get on with this. And that's a big difference. That's an attitude.
Thank you for that. So I just wondered what Frederick Heinz, you thought of that. I mean, risk, okay, but does that go in with the human-centered approach of the European values that we want?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to concur with Yasida. I mean, I think we are too risk averse in some sense, and that we're putting, of course, I think, I mean, we want to strive for safety, and all these things are also important, but we have to do both. And I actually think it also connects back to this previous question about startups. When I talk to startups, they say, well, if I go to the US or China, I get 10 times the amount of money from a company. So do I want to sell to a European investor, or do I want to go outside and get more funding? And that is often also related to risk that one is willing to take. And I see the same thing in the public sector, where we see that there's a lot of opportunities, but there's a lot of interest in doing, but no one wants to be first. If someone else has shown this works, it can be done, then there's a lot of followers. But what we're missing are the leaders, the companies that dare to step up and say, well, there is a chance we might fail. We are aware of the risk, we are aware of the challenges, but we will do it anyway. And that's the kind of attitude we need more of. And then I think we can do that in a way that is human-centered and trustworthy. Those are not contradictions, but we need someone to lead the way and take the lead and show the way.
Okay, thank you. I'll just take another question that's come in. It was, what are the areas of AI that the EU could strategically focus on and perhaps make the biggest progress in comparison to the USA and also China? So I just wondered, potentially, Christelle Fiorina, do you have a view on, is there something that the EU should focus on when it comes to AI?
Yes, when it comes to AI, I think that if we want to have a lot of startups, and not only startups, but to have startups to be a unicorn, because that's also a problem. The problem is for a startup to start, to grow, and to be a unicorn after. And I think in that case, EU have to solve some issues with the member countries. First of all, it's to bring investment, not only public investment, but private investment in the companies. And for instance, in France, we try to, with the public investment, to have a leverage effect on the private investment in companies, and to help our startups to grow on the French territory, but also in the European territory. Secondly, I think that one of the problems for the startups and the companies in Europe is that the market is still too fragmented. And I have, for instance, startups that tell me that it's easier to grow to attack the US market than growing on the European market, because the market is still too fragmented. And I think that one aim of the coordinated plan is to create that common market in AI. And lastly, I think that one issue is also to be attractive for talents. We have a lot of talents in Europe, but I think there are few talents in comparison with the demand of jobs. And also you have to collaborate together in Europe to create the condition to attract talents for other countries, other continents in Europe.
Okay, Rita, you wanted to come in there. You put your microphone on.
I don't. Okay, good. So answering to the two questions about what we can do in Europe and why probably the company is not so big, I think that continue the discussion. We have another things. We need to think in a very broad and large manner. I give you an example. We started to, let's suppose to do something for smart cities and for humans. We start for small city, then we go to region, to national level, and probably to Europe. Instead, when you, in the US, they started to completely different things. Last year I was in Amazon and talking with the people from the research group in Amazon. They told me, give me an example of a next project that we can start to do at worldwide level. So we need to think to do something at worldwide level, not only for Europe, not only for nation, not only for region, not only for cities, not only for a neighborhood. It's something that we really need to speak in a large term. I believe that this could be done at the startup level, at the industry level, and together with in the public and private partnership. Another example, just to give you some strong example. Think about a street view or from one side Google Map or Waze that actually started in Israel, that started to grow up. Now all of them are from Google. So now we could do similar things about human-centric approach that we have, for instance, for human and environment interaction, human and city interaction, collecting and processing our data and doing something really at not only European but worldwide level. But we needed to think to big project. This is something that I think we should discuss. At least I discuss with my students of that.
Okay, and I'm going to take one final question before we go to our final round of statements. And Marina, Bill, there's one question that's come in, which is a sort of question that always comes. What can we do to prevent brain drain in Europe? And I suppose as a big employer of robotics, you want to attract talent as well. What can be done?
I think a lot of things is being done, and it's an important question. I think, again, also everybody has to work on their part. So we have one of our largest factories of robotics actually in Europe. By offering and opening up being active also as an industry already in the education, in universities, showing the opportunity of working very close to universities, master thesis and so on. So we don't have this split, you're in the school and then you go to industry, but we have this more way of working together so that you very early see the possibilities, what you can do where you're studying or in your country or in your region, to see that possibility and build on that one. So, and then the lifelong learning, to go back a little bit to what was discussed also before, that it's offering that you start with something and then you continue to develop no matter where you are, that you don't think you have to go somewhere completely else to have your own learning path in there. I think that are things we need to work on. And then we need to continue to develop really cool technology. I mean, that in itself, and seeing how this technology is used in practice, not only in the research center, but really how it can get used in front of customers, how we can use everyday problems for people. I mean, there's few things that is so rewarding to see how things makes a difference. I think just living it every day, and it doesn't matter if you're a startup or a big company or a university, you know, we all have to join here.
Okay, Giuseppe Casale, I just wondered what you had to say on that, you know, because you're looking at creating jobs for the ILO, decent work. What can be done to attract talent and avoid brain drain?
Well, I think there are probably two major policy measures that sooner or later the European Union has to tackle. They are already discussing it, but I think will be crucial in order to make sure that the overall 27 European Union countries will move ahead together. One is definitely what I consider to be a universal labor guarantee, which means, in terms of what the ILO has always preached, that irrespective of the contract of the nature of the contract arrangements or the contract of employment that you have definitively the respect of what we call it the fundamental workers' rights, which are practically the backbone, if you like, of the social values of the European Union and also the social values of the ILO. Another major element, I think, to make sure, particularly for the new younger generation, which actually are the ones who are suffering most from the current post-COVID crisis, is the recognition of what we call it an adequate living wage. This adequate living wage, which is, by the way, not necessarily considered as the minimum wage, but an adequate living wage, is an old request of this organization. If you read the constitution of the ILO, you already see that in 1919, this was one of the aspirations to give it to the workers. And finally, make it sure that there is a genuine human-centered approach to technology in support of decent work, of what the new jobs looks like, which means a participatory approach, particularly by every individual in making those decisions which are going to affect their lives for the next 10, 15, 20 years. If we don't do this, this will be another schizophrenic kind of different solutions to a worldwide problem. But Europe, believe me, is still the region to which all the other geographical areas look at as an example. So we can make it. We can make it because we have all the necessary qualities to do this and to make a success. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've got about 5 minutes left. I just want to go round the speakers again, and this time just kind of a final thought. Is there a takeaway from this conversation we've had today? Is there a next step the Commission should be doing? I give you all 1 minute each. So I'll start with you, Rita.
Okay, thank you for this minute. I believe that the European Commission is working really well, at least in artificial intelligence activities, because they started to give a proclama of what is for us the technology in contact with the human. And I believe that this program and this paradigm is spreading a lot, especially in the US and in the American part. So this kind of things is fantastic, and I ask the European community to continue to work in this manner. But now what I ask also is to work really together with the specific country in order to make in practice many things that we are starting to discuss with. I believe that we can really start also, for instance, a big project at European level for data collection, for neural network and machine learning approaches made in Europe. We can start like DARPA in the US to create a big challenge for the future. So I think that we need to ask to the European community to discuss a lot about some priority, also in terms of application or in terms of societal challenge, and asking us to work together for this big problem. And remember that AI is an application, but we need to force the fundamental research. Even I'm working more with industry than in fundamental research, because remember that AI is not a technology that can be applied, but is a technology that is still at its infancy and has to be grow up. So we have really the chance to grow up for these technologies in Europe, and we have not to lose the train now. So this is my message.
Thank you very much. Okay, Frederick Hines, a closing thought from you.
Thank you. Well, I do think we are on a good path. I think a major challenge is that we're doing the right things, but we're relatively slow and we're relatively small. So I really think what we need to do is scale up and speed up the things that we are doing. And I think another takeaway is this on the lifelong learning and education. I really think we need to start to think about how should we educate people. I mean, one example I use is that the amount of knowledge grows exponentially. Assume it grows, doubles every 2 years to be conservative. It means that 2 years after you leave your, say, university education or your PhD, and you've learned everything up to that date, means 2 years later, you only know half. 4 years later, you know a quarter. 6 years later, you know an eighth. This means that you need to learn so much more after you finish your education than during your education. And secondly, it also means that what we can fit into a fixed length education program is shrinking over the time. So if it's 100% today, in 2 years, it will be 50%. In 4 years, it will be 25%. So there we have another major challenge, how to educate for this, and that was mentioned up. And finally, I think we really need to dare to lead, because if we lead, we will people will look at us and take after what we do. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we've got 3 minutes for the rest of the speakers to give their final thoughts. So Laure Labar, closing thought, please.
Yeah, I will partially answer to the previous point where I think Europe has largely contributed to the rise and the upswing of AI and data and robotics as well up until now, and we should keep this central role in shaping the technology future. And I disagree somehow that we lag behind or this kind of thing. I mean, what is visible is this type of B2C type of industry where we are pretty strong in B2B as well. So it may not be known for the common public. Another aspect as well, and we keep repeating it on this human-centric AI, etc. This is important as well. This is our strength here. We, by design, we take care of privacy, we take care of security, etc. So it may look more complicated and takes time, but this is this makes something much more valuable, of course, but also sustainable, and that's important, and that's definitely where we can progress. We have the expertise, and we can progress in deployment of those technology. So I think, and I will go back to the partnership, of course, we need this energy towards building this current infrastructure, and stimulate the deployment and adoption, and building this effective innovation ecosystem, and of course drive excellent research.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Let's go to Marina Bill. You've got 20 seconds.
Oh yeah. I think a lot of the things I hear is really global issues also. I mean, we're also #1 in China. A lot of these things are global issues and not European specific. And I think the training and testing facilities, as we see in also other places outside Europe, if we can do more there, and then stay quick and stay curious.
Fantastic. Perfect 20 seconds. Christelle Fiorina. You need to switch your microphone on.
I'm sorry. The French government is supporting the coordinated plan and the ethic guidelines, and made proposal for the white paper of the Commission. I think now we are on a good path, a good step, but we must go faster. We must go faster, having concrete projects at the European level with research, with companies, and we must go faster, creating that third way that was named by the Commissioner Breton, the third way based on a human-centric approach, because we have the same values in Europe and we have the same concern, especially in the climate change. So now we have to develop concrete applications in manufacturing, in agri-food, for instance, security, the defense, and environment, mobility also, concrete application to have business and to create innovation on that markets.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Giuseppe Casale, just very briefly, a closing thought.
Very, very briefly, I would like to see a bit more attention on a European governance system for digital labor platforms, in order to make sure that both platforms, but also the clients of these platforms respect minimum rights and protections. And second, if I may say so, is that there should be more regulations of data use and algorithmic accountability, particularly in the world of work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Yassir Kokar, finally, 10
Sure.
seconds for you.
Yeah, I'll keep it short. I think we're doing pretty well. We've got great research. We need to look at our risk profile and how much risk we want to take. And if all the doom and gloom talk play to our strengths, mission-driven companies will keep your talent in, and that's Europe's strength. Get behind them. And there's a lot of great stuff around climate and sustainability that can be done by AI, which nobody else will touch. So overall, it's pretty good. It's not bad. So let's keep doing what we're doing.
Thank you very much to all the panelists. I really like your optimism and some of the consensus there about scaling up, moving faster, and much about lifelong learning as well. So thank you very much to all our panelists. If we could only give you a round of applause, I'll applaud you virtually. Thank you. Right, now we're going to hear from Pekka Ala-Pietila, who is chair of the high-level expert group on artificial intelligence. And he's going to tell us about the sector-specific recommendations of the group's work. Pekka.
Thank you, Anya. I hope you hear me.
We can.
Perfect. Ladies and gentlemen, in June 2018, independent high-level expert group on AI was set up by EU Commission, comprising of 52 experts with wide range of expertise and diversity, which we certainly need it all. We had two tasks, two deliverables. The one, ethics guidelines for trustworthy AI, addressing everyone who is developing, deploying, and using AI. And then D2, a policy and investment recommendations for trustworthy AI, which was addressed to the European institutions and member states. The ethical guidelines for trustworthy AI was published in April 2019 and recommendations in June 2019. In both cases, we felt that we managed to deliver reports which were solid and complete on their own right. Having said that, there was a merit to continue the work and dive deeper into the certain specificities within these reports. Within the ethics guidelines for trustworthy AI, we have an assessment list aimed to support the research entities and companies in their own self-diagnosis to be self-aware and aligned with 7 requirements for lawful, ethical, and technically robust way of applying AI. We wanted to verify that our assessment list, comprising of 130 questions, was the most relevant and accurate for its purpose. Later today, you will hear Barry O'Sullivan, our vice chair, explaining in more details the deep dive work we did, and as one outcome of that, the use of special software in applying the assessment list. Then, within the policy and investment recommendations, we outlined the contours of proportionate, holistic policy framework that would allow EU policymakers and stakeholders to maximize the benefits of AI while minimizing and mitigating its associated risks. By really condensing our main report's 33 recommendations on how to use trustworthy AI to build positive impact in Europe as a backdrop for further and future consideration, we can squeeze those to 11 simple takeaways. The same can be achieved by empowering and protecting humans and society, by taking up a tailored approach in different market segments to AI landscape. So making the distinction between B2C, B2B, public to citizens with needed granularity. By securing a single European market for trustworthy AI, by enabling AI-powered ecosystems through sectoral multi-stakeholder alliances, by fostering European data economy, by exploiting the multifaceted role of the public sector, by strengthening and uniting Europe's research capabilities, by nurturing education to the Fourth, power, primary, secondary, university, and lifelong learning. By adopting a risk-based governance approach to AI and ensuring an appropriate regulatory framework. By stimulating open and lucrative investment environment. And then the 11th, by embracing a holistic way of working, combining a long-term vision with consistent and coherent rolling action plans in order to create the speed what is so crucial here. These 33 recommendations, 11 takeaways were general in nature and therefore did not address the specific topics emerging in specific economic or societal domains. After their publication, we decided to explore their possible implementation with respect to a limited number of policy areas. In particular, we wanted to further discuss 3 sectors which are of great importance for the sustained well-being, as well as for enhancing Europe's sustainable growth and competitiveness to AI, thanks to AI. The sectors were the public sector, healthcare, and manufacturing and Internet of Things. Despite the problems created by the COVID pandemic during the first half of 2020, we managed to organize 3 successful sets of workshops in April 2022, in which we collected feedback and engaged with stakeholders. And while this exercise cannot be considered as representative as full-fledged open stakeholder consultation, it nevertheless shed light on a number of issues that deserve careful consideration by EU institutions in months and years to come, and were highlighted by workshop participants as important to ensure a successful AI policy in Europe. In this report, which was published in July this year, the AI high-level expert group presents a number of themes that have emerged in the organized workshops as collected and understood by our members that acted as rapporteurs and considered by the whole group in making its final conclusions. And here I would like to address and give a special thanks for this work, and the thanks here belongs to Cecilia Bonfeld-Dahl, Leo Kärkkäinen, Pierre Luca, Perry O'Sullivan, and François Soulier-Vogelmann for acting as sector leads and drafting the corresponding workshop reports. To Andrea Renda, contributing as the editor to this report, and to Charlotte Stix, coordinating our work and providing the crucial editorial support. So, against this backdrop, a number of themes have emerged in all workshops and are briefly as follows. Firstly, the policy and investment recommendations for trustworthy AI are perceived as important and relevant in all 3 sectors. And at the same time, there's a merit in adapting and refining these policy and investment recommendations to account for sectoral specificities. Trustworthiness is seen as a crucial feature of European AI. This applies to AI systems as well as key inputs such as data and required safeguards in terms of transparency, explainability, and safety arrangements necessary to encourage AI uptake across all sectors. There's a wide concern about the need to close the skill gaps. There are consensus in all 3 workshops that Europe needs to upskill and reskill its workforce, harness technical AI talent from a young age, and support those that are asked to handle AI systems in their daily work environment. In addition to the need for a broad set of relevant competencies was highlighted. Finally, participants broadly agreed that data and AI literacy needs to be encouraged and supported across all the sectors and all stakeholder groups. Respect for diversity and inclusion is key. This need was raised in various contexts during the workshops. The inclusion of employees throughout the deployment of AI in organizations is essential when it comes to the decision made with regard to the work environment. Europe should be a leader in responsible, sustainable AI research and innovation. The stakeholders that participated in our workshop stressed the importance of establishing research and experimental facilities, as well as excellent centers to boost Europe AI research and development. While a number of initiatives are already underway, additional effort will be needed to ensure that the EU achieves its ambitious goal to be leader in trustworthy AI. Public procurement could be used strategically to fund innovation-driven, trustworthy AI-based solutions. Good governance and widespread sharing of best practices are essential to increase regulatory certainty. The challenges and risks accompanying certain AI systems and use cases are not easy to detect and address. Awareness and uptake of best practices are needed for developers to consider values and ethical implications by design, as well as mitigate and assess potential risks. Stakeholders perceive the need for strong guidance in an environment characterized by a breathtaking pace of change. Importance of transparency and accountability. The greater the risks generated by AI system, the broader its prospective social impacts, and the more transparent, understandable, and accountable system should be. Mechanisms to explain the behavior of AI systems in accessible language and format in all involved stakeholders should therefore be supported, at the same time following a risk-based proportionate approach to the imposition of regulatory duties and responsibilities. Data quality, availability, and interoperability must be at the core of EU policy. Workshop participants highlighted the importance of promoting access to high-quality data and data sharing trusted spaces, and noted that well-organized sectoral European data spaces hold great promise for AI development uptake. Non-personal data should be made accessible to those looking to develop and deploy trustworthy AI solutions. And interoperability of data between administrations and mandatory access to key public datasets for research and innovation should be promoted in full respect to data protection and privacy laws. In conclusion, the workshop demonstrated the importance of discussing the requirements for trustworthy AI at sectoral level. We believe it's crucial that policymakers recognize the importance of sectoral perspectives at European and member state level. As a next step, we call upon policymakers at national and European level to further conduct in-depth analysis of sectors that are crucial for Europe's sustainability, growth and competitiveness, and inclusion, with the aim to secure individual and social well-being. Hopefully, our document can serve as an inspiration for these needed sectorial in-depth analysis. Thank you for your attention.
And thank you very much to Pekka Ala-Patilja for the recommendations there and the update. Now, it's time for you, the audience, to have your say and take part in our breakout sessions. The Commission are looking for your input, and also all the workshops are detailed on the slide just next to me. Registered participants will have already received a calendar invite, but you can find the sessions on the online agenda as well. Just a quick reminder, the 3 sessions are AI tools to fight the COVID pandemic, advanced automation through AI, and uptake of AI in the public sector. Now, the breakout sessions are going to last an hour until 12:45, and then you can take a well-deserved lunch break and then be back promptly to resume our afternoon deliberations at 1:45, when we'll be discussing the other key pillar of the white paper, that of trust. So thank you very much, everyone, for your attention this morning. Bye.